Have you ever felt like your mind is awake even when your body is exhausted? Like you notice things other people seem to move right past, and once you see them, you can't unsee them. Awareness can feel like a strange kind of light. Not the warm, comforting kind that helps you relax at the end of the day, but a harsh overhead light that never shuts off. It illuminates everything. Every pause in a conversation, every shift in tone, every moment where something feels slightly off, even when you're tired, even when you just want your thoughts to quiet down. Most people move through life with the lights dimmed just enough to function. They notice what they need to notice and let the rest fade into the background. But some minds don't have that switch. For them, awareness is always on. And while that might look like intelligence or emotional depth from the outside, from the inside, it often feels like living without curtains. Nothing blurs, nothing softens, nothing fully disappears. When you're too aware, you don't just experience moments. You monitor them. You sense what's unspoken before words arrive. You feel tension before anyone admits it's there. You notice when something changes long before other people realize anything has shifted. And even in silence, even in calm, your mind keeps scanning, reading, interpreting, trying to understand what's really happening beneath the surface, not because you want to overthink, but because your nervous system doesn't know how to stop looking. Here's the part most people miss. This level of awareness isn't always a gift. Sometimes it's a form of wakefulness that never learned how to rest. A mind that learned to stay alert so well, it forgot how to be at ease. For the overly aware mind, life isn't a series of simple moments. It's an equation always running quietly in the background. Every interaction becomes something to solve. Not out of suspicion, but instinct. You don't just hear what someone says. You notice how long they paused before saying it. You don't just register a smile. You catch the half second it faded too early. You don't just read a message. You feel the weight of what wasn't written. Why now? Why that word? Why does this room feel different today, even though nothing looks different? While others are present in the moment, your mind is working behind the scenes, connecting dots, tracking patterns, updating its internal model of the world. It's like living with a second screen always open. One part of you is participating. The other is observing, calculating, adjusting. A casual comment isn't just a comment. A delayed reply isn't just timing. A shift in energy isn't just mood. It's information. And that constant analysis is exhausting. Not because it's negative, but because it never shuts off. Your brain treats social life the way an engineer treats a system. If something changes, there must be a reason. So you search for it. You replay conversations. You scan for inconsistencies. You try to understand what's happening beneath the surface so you can stay oriented, prepared, safe. And the irony is, from the inside, this doesn't feel dramatic. It feels responsible, thoughtful, even necessary. But over time, something subtle happens. Understanding starts to replace experiencing. Presence gets traded for precision. You don't stop living, but you begin living slightly outside yourself. There's a particular kind of awareness that doesn't just observe the world. It observes itself. You don't just feel an emotion. You notice that you're feeling it. Then you analyze why. Then you evaluate whether it makes sense. Then you wonder what it says about you. By the time the emotion has moved through your body, your mind has already dissected it from every angle. Sadness doesn't arrive alone. It shows up with questions. Is this justified? Is this old? Is this about now or something from before? Even happiness isn't spared. You can feel joy and almost immediately step outside of it, watching yourself be happy, wondering how long it will last, wondering what might interrupt it. It's like dancing while constantly checking your reflection. You might perfect the steps, but you lose the music. When awareness turns inward like this, it creates depth, but it also creates distance. You're half living and half narrating. half feeling and half reviewing. Over time, your inner life starts to feel like quiet surveillance. Your thoughts are watched. Your reactions are filtered before they're allowed to land. What began as self-awareness slowly turns into self-interruption. And the hardest part? It feels intelligent. It feels mature. It feels like emotional responsibility. But the human mind was never meant to be both the dancer and the critic at the same time. When thinking loops inward like this, spontaneity slowly disappears. You stop responding naturally and start managing yourself. At some point, awareness stops being observation and becomes revelation. You start seeing behind the curtain of human behavior. You notice that people don't always mean what they say. That kindness can come with conditions. That reassurance sometimes hides insecurity, not because people are bad, but because they're human. And with that understanding comes a quiet kind of loss. Not the loss of childhood innocence, but relational innocence. The ability to take words as words, gestures as gestures, love as something uncomplicated. Once you've seen how often people contradict themselves, how fear disguises itself as confidence, how love and insecurity can exist side by side, you can't fully unsee it. Relationships start to feel layered. Communication becomes something you translate instead of receive. And that insight, while accurate, can be isolating. Because when you see behind the curtain, you're no longer just watching the play. You're aware of the strings, the lighting, the fragile mechanics holding everything together. Even when the performance is beautiful, part of you knows how easily it could fall apart. That knowledge doesn't make you cynical. It makes you careful, and sometimes quietly lonely. For deeply aware people, empathy is always running in the background. You don't just hear what people say. You feel the emotional weight underneath it. You sense when someone is holding back. You notice the tightness in their voice, the moment their eyes look away. Long before anything is said out loud, you already know something is wrong. From the outside, this looks like emotional intelligence. You read between the lines. You choose words carefully. You know when to pause and when to soften your tone. People feel safe with you because you make them feel seen. But there's a cost to that kind of empathy. When you're always tuned into everyone else's emotions, you start carrying feelings that were never yours to begin with. A tense room follows you home. Someone else's sadness lingers in your body. And because you understand where these feelings come from, you rarely push them away. You manage them. You absorb them. You regulate the room. Over time, this creates a quiet imbalance. You become the emotional container. And while that looks like strength, it leads to exhaustion. Because when you're always the one who understands, people forget to ask whether you need understanding too. Empathy that never powers down doesn't just connect you to others. It slowly teaches you to disappear inside that connection. This kind of awareness doesn't live only in the mind. For many people, it lives in the body first. You notice your heart rate change before the thought arrives. The tightening in your chest, the shallow breath, the drop in your stomach. These sensations register as information, and your mind immediately starts interpreting them. Something is wrong. Something is coming. This is where awareness can quietly tip into anxiety. When the body becomes a constant stream of data, every sensation starts to feel meaningful. Fatigue becomes a warning. Restlessness becomes a problem to solve. The line between a passing feeling and a threat starts to blur. And the irony is, this sensitivity didn't develop to harm you. It developed to protect you. A nervous system that learned to stay alert, learned to detect shifts early. But without guidance, that sensitivity turns inward and amplifies distress. Sensation triggers interpretation. Interpretation triggers tension. Tension creates more sensation. And suddenly, the body feels loud, crowded with signals that never fully settle. This level of awareness rarely appears out of nowhere. For many people, it begins early in life, not as a personality trait, but as an adaptation. In environments where emotions were unpredictable, where moods could shift without warning, where safety depended on reading subtle cues, awareness wasn't optional. It was necessary. As a child, you learned to scan the room the moment you walked in, to notice tone before words, to sense the emotional temperature before deciding how to speak or whether to speak at all. No one taught you this directly. Your nervous system learned it for you. Over time, vigilance turned into awareness. Awareness turned into identity. You didn't think of yourself as someone who watches. You thought of yourself as someone who's responsible. This is where many overly aware adults misunderstand themselves. They think they're overthinking because something is wrong with them. But what they're experiencing is intelligence shaped by survival, sensitivity forged by adaptation. The tragedy is that what once kept you safe doesn't always know when to stand down. As an adult, your life may be stable. Your relationships may be calm. But your system still acts like something could change at any moment. So it keeps scanning, keeps listening, keeps preparing. And that's why awareness often comes with exhaustion. Not because life is too demanding, but because your nervous system never learned that it's allowed to rest. At a certain point, awareness quietly turns into control. Not control over others, but control over uncertainty. If you can predict what people will do, maybe you won't be caught off guard. If you can anticipate emotional shifts, maybe nothing will hurt as much. So your mind runs simulations constantly. You've lived 10 versions of the future before the present has finished unfolding. You hesitate, you delay, not because you don't care, but because you care deeply. But protection replaces presence. Life starts to feel like something you're managing instead of something you're living. And here's the shift. The way forward isn't seeing less. It's carrying less. For a long time, awareness may have felt like a responsibility. If you noticed something, you felt obligated to interpret it, respond to it, manage it. But not every signal is an assignment. Not every insight needs action. Learning to notice without absorbing is what turns awareness into wisdom. When you stop treating every perception as urgent, your nervous system begins to relax. You laugh without checking why. You feel without translating. You listen without preparing a response. You don't lose your depth. You reclaim your presence. Awareness stops feeling like a spotlight and starts feeling like warmth. And slowly, life feels lighter. Not because it's simpler, but because you're no longer carrying it all at once. If any of this felt familiar, you're not broken. You're not too much. You're someone whose mind learned to stay awake for a reason. And now, you're learning that it's finally safe to rest.